Thank you everybody, and thank you for having me here. Again, fantastic to be in a room full of people. Great session before that with by you on message board. Bird, we'll definitely like to connect with you on that. Thank you everybody for being here. Good to see a full house. Thank you also for the panelists who've come from a variety of industries, also from the ministry. Thank you so much. So obviously innovation is clearly the subject for the day. We had Manish also talk about some of the work they are doing from Amazon is doing to drive innovation with the MSME, looking at exports, making the whole business very seamless for customers and for sellers. So I'm going to start, Dr. Jivisha, with you being the only lady on the dais. So I'm going to, from a inclusion perspective, I'm going to give you the first shot at it. Just in terms of, how do you define when you look at the industries today, and also as a customer and as a government official, how do you define innovation today in the industry, and how important is it as we are looking at e-commerce and the overall sort of digital transformation of businesses? And actually before that, let me get everybody to just do a 30-second introduction for yourselves. Maybe easier to do that. So ma'am, I'll start with you first.
Thank you so much. So I'm Dr. Jivisha Joshi Gangopadhyay. I'm Deputy Secretary Logistics, and I'm the Nodal Officer for PM Gati Shakti. Thank you.
Prakash, to you.
Hi, I'm Prakash Sangam, CEO of redBus. redBus is an online aggregator of intercity bus services.
Amit.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Amit. I'm part of the Google Cloud team. I sell cloud to startups in India.
Hi, my name is Vineeth, Nair. I look after the AJIO B2C business, which is a part of the Reliance retail network.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Samuel Sathyajith. I head Cloudflare for India and the SAARC region. Cloudflare is a global cloud provider, innovating and disrupting on the network and network security as a service.
Samir.
Hi everyone, I'm Samir Satpathy. I'm from ITC. I'm the FMCG side of the business. We have hotels, we have cigarettes, and FMCG. So I'm the FMCG side. Yeah.
Lovely, Samir. I started my career many years ago at ITC. So good to have you on that. So ma'am, over to you. Innovation.
Thank you. So, Rajat, when we talk about government, generally innovation is not the word you're looking at. Generally, we are...
not in this government. We have a lot of innovation.
Yeah, I was about... you're taking my answer, actually. That's how I'm about to start that, But I would be happy to say that we have, at least I'd like to believe that we have tried to bring that change. Now, when we're looking at how the government is working, we are looking at innovation. We are trying to bring what is latest in the market, in the industry, especially the ministry I belong to, which is Ministry of Commerce and Industry. We are very much focused on what the industry requires from us. So we stand as a facilitator rather than an inhibitor, the way we used to be looked at. So when you talk about innovation, since I'm the only representative from government, I'll give you the view of what we are doing rather than talk about, we have esteemed panelists to talk about other things. There was one thing which we realized is that as a government, you have to facilitate, you have to handhold, and you have to make sure that the people, the industry, you need to make sure that they proliferate and they make the best of what is available to them.
Absolutely.
And one of the most important part in that is to do the resolution of all the issues which they are facing in variety, whether it concerns the laws, the rules, whatever we have made, or the present structure of any kind of governance which is happening. So our division, what we are doing is that the general setup you have in government is that if you want to approach an official, what you do is write a letter. You mark it to the official, then it gets lost in the pile of letter, and you're not aware that how or if that problem was ever resolved. Next, what you do is you go, visit the officer, maybe meet the supervisor, and try to locate which person is the correct person, and then you try to trace the whole thing. Now, what we are trying to do right now is that we are trying to come up with a sort of a dashboard of thing, and where we will be allocating the resources, we will be marking the whole thing, we will be, so if a problem is there, which department it runs to, not just our market, like all the other ministries as well. I'm talking about industry here. So if they have an issue, it can come to us. It will be a digitally track and traced resolution of problem in a specified time. And that will be open to the person who will be registered on that platform, as well as it will be monitored by the Honorable Minister along with the set of officers who will be making sure that in a defined time, either that issue is resolved or we come up with some sort of solution. So that is one of the examples. The other one is that we are trying to look at the standardization. a lot of supply chain issue, a lot of logistic issues are not resolved because of lack of standardization in our country. When we talk about exports, yes, we have a lot of standardization, but for the internal movement, we have a higher logistic cost due to the lack of availability of standardization, whether it's warehousing sector, pallets or whatever. So we are trying to also come up with some sort of a handbook where we can talk about more than 200 standardization, which we are not going to bind on anyone. It is just to give a nudge to even the smallest player in the industry that if they follow, if they try to standardize in this way, it may lead or it may help their supply chain system. So I think that's all.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, and I think standardization is a big issue today. If you look at Manish's earlier comments about setting up 44 million square feet of warehousing, but if you have different types of transport landing up there, the unloading, loading, and I'm sure at ITC you have the same challenges with all your distributors. The kind of transportation that you have to cater to, so you can't palletize, you can standardize. But great to hear that. I think you see that every day in our lives today, that the government is very innovative, lots of new thoughts, and it's good to hear that you have a faster way of tracking problems, and maybe some solutions could come out of this conversation here as well. So I'm going to just come to you, Vineeth, in terms of how do you define innovation? Especially you're leading a fashion business. How do you define innovation today, and how important is it to succeed in today's competitive business environment?
See, according to me, innovation as a word is often bandied around. We tend to often look at it from the perspective of customer-facing innovative features that one puts out in the market. But for me, innovation is adaptation, not adoption, very distinct from adoption. And often innovation sort of pops into every organization's life cycle at some point in time when it's either there is some substantial opportunity that he's looking at or the organization looking at, or sometimes even just existential threat. What one is seeing in the past few years, and especially in the, in the last few years, especially in India, with the amount of content that's being consumed and with the kind of demonstration effect that consumers are possibly realizing, you're seeing this advent of consumers getting far, far more demanding, and most brands lag behind that expectation. Consumer expectations are rising dramatically, and that is when an organization needs to figure out what it needs to do to be able to stay in pace with the competition, and most importantly, even exist. Because as you've seen, many of the legacy businesses have refused or haven't recognized or haven't been able to even figure out possible impacts of technology or the changing consumer mindsets, because all that at the end of it is what is reflected by a consumer. Your consumer, the day you're able to, or as an organization, have the ability to put your consumer into the center of everything that you do, is a point in time when you need to start looking at the term innovation and what it does for you. Innovation clearly is your ability to potentially look at it from all elements. We as consumers tend to see it from what happens at the customer-facing end of the business. But in the kind of business I am in, and mostly in many of the businesses that you guys are, innovation impacts every element of the value chain. Most of us tend to believe that as there is rapid changes in consumers who were in the past at best passive observers to how a brand operated, today are digitally empowered and are demanding a lot more than most brands are in a position to deliver. So for you to be able to put your consumers in the center of whatever you do and then working around it is when you're able to create nudges and pushes. And these are what I call the trickling initiatives that one could define as innovation. You know, it doesn't need to be a big bang, or you don't need to be the first mover. At the end of it, an innovation has to have the ability to make multiple small changes to your value that deliver, to your value chain that delivers an enhanced customer experience. And an enhanced customer experience, at the end of it, is the kind of goal that most organizations are pushing towards. You're trying to move towards a scenario where you're able to build the holy grail of most businesses, the long-term sustainable competitive advantage. And there is no better long-term sustainable competitive advantage than an best-in-class customer service.
Thanks, Vineeth. And I think those are valued points, right? Customer at the center. We've talked about it for years, but as a customer, sometimes I feel I'm never at the center. I'm always on the periphery, trying to get in the center. So it'll be good to just see how innovation is driving that, and because there is a firm hat that we firmly believe. And I'll just come back. I think there's a question around analytics, and we'll talk a bit about that. So we'll come to you about that. Obviously ITC, big innovations as well. A lot of new categories you guys have got into in the last few years, the wonderful chocolates and everything that we are big fans of. Talk a bit about innovation and what does it mean to you, and how do you sort of define that today from a success perspective?
See, innovation has always been critical before, now, and in the future. So I think let's keep that on one side. But what is innovation, and how do, at least I look at it? See, any problem in the world can be solved if you have enough money and you have enough time. The problem is, you sometimes don't have enough money, and you sometimes don't have enough time. That's what the role of innovation is. It solves for that. And in the context of where we are and the summit, I think digital is breaking that. I think Manish hinted upon that when he talked for people who listened to him. He talked about the time it took to launch a new product or a new innovation. Money, because your scale had to be different, you had to advertise. So thumb rule, I'll just give you a thumb rule. If you want to do a national launch, maybe 30 crores, 40 crores. If it's not a very, how do I put it, not a very competitive category, right? So your advertising spends. So you can put the thumb rule saying, if that's my advertising spend, my turnover. Ideas are there which will start at 100 crores, 200 crores, 300 crores. So what digital is doing is something very, very different. You can nurture small ideas and you can grow them. It's like a nursery. I think I tell my team, I tell my brand managers, they are living in a fantastic world today. I would love to be in this world and be a brand manager again, because you have 50 ideas, but you could only do would convince people around you. So if you want to do 50, and if you have the energy and the ability, you can do all 50. Hello. Yeah. So digital is giving us that ability, the ability to nurture, to start, because it's a medium where you can start small. You can advertise or you can communicate, you can do full funnel on the channel. You can look at decent ideas, you can look at niches, and you can then grow the niches, and then you can scale them. So it's not about being first, but also about scaling them, and digital gives you that. So I think it is, the new gold rush. We know a lot of people have entered, but I think this is only the beginning. The second thing is, if you look at India, India has been maybe a land of unorganized entrepreneur. Every shopkeeper is an entrepreneur. Today, I think digital is also giving them, and they're already in the business. They already take risk. They feed their families every day. They don't have the ability of doing cash burn. They need the cash to take back home, and they do it. And they're going to use digital to even expand further. So I think it's a great time to be in India. I think it's changing, and I think we all are loving it.
Thank you, thanks, and some good thoughts there. That digital is really compressing time and money to be able to get products on shelf. In the past, when people had to launch a product in India, you had to distribute it nationally. You had to go and find 1,000 distributors, credit, working capital, logistics, e-commerce, and especially the digitization of the businesses has really compressed all of that. Prakash, I come to you. Talk briefly about how you are seeing innovation and how do you define that?
Yeah, for me, the definition, if you look at it very plainly and simply, it's really about innovation is about any new idea that is brought to market that in a way adds more value to your product or service or helps you with any other business objective. Now, in this forum, we are talking about, we are all digital natives and e-commerce companies. So I'm assuming that for a lot of us, the primary value delivery to customers is happening through technology, right? It's a fair assumption. And technology itself is changing at a very rapid clip. There are multiple things that keep happening, newer things keep coming in, newer capabilities get created. And as business owners, it's very important for us to look at the changing landscape and see how can we exploit these new capabilities to innovate further, right? Let me just illustrate that from the life stage of our business, my business, which is redBus. Many of you may be aware that we started about 15, 16 years ago. It was a pioneering, innovative idea then to aggregate all the intercity bus services and make it available on an online interface. But over time, that was available for people to book on a desktop or a laptop, right? But over the last 16 years, there have been so many other fundamental innovations that have happened, like the iPhone came, and then massive innovation, then Android democratized the smartphone, and suddenly smartphones became affordable, everybody had it. And that gave a platform for a business like redBus to rethink its product role from just being a ticket booking application to solving for a lot of pain points that customers experienced in their bus journey. Many of you who have taken buses intercity would know that buses, unlike say rail or air, doesn't have a formal infrastructure. You kind of it tends to pick you up from roadsides, curbsides. If you're new to a city, you often don't know where to wait for the bus. And then there is an innovation on mapping. So we can exploit that, geocode all the boarding points of all the operators, and then navigate people to that boarding point, right? That's one example of innovation. If you're standing by the side of the road, you have no clue where the bus is. So then you've got GPS as an innovation that you can ride on, have GPS in the buses and let people track the live location of the bus. So these are innovations that happen in the ecosystem that you can ride on as a business and have cascading effects. And let me tell you that as far as the importance is concerned, if as a technology business, if you don't ride on these newer waves of technology, then it's only a matter of time before your lunch is eaten by someone else. So it's absolutely critical to look at what is happening in the external environment and then kind of keep building on that. And those are rich avenues to keep further innovating on your business.
Great point. Innovation doesn't have to come from within, but I think you've got to nurture the innovation that's happening around you, because one thing is very clear, that you don't have all the answers today. A lot of startups are coming from left field, right field, taking away your lunch. And so innovation is not just about, what I can innovate, but how can I ride the innovation, and whether it's mapping, etc. Great point. Gaurav, I'll just come to you. You are sort of late entrant. Sorry, you got stuck in traffic, but just quick 30 seconds about yourself, and then if you can just talk about innovation as well, quickly.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Gaurav Singh Kushwaha, founder and CEO of Bluestone. India is one of the leading omni-channel jewelry brand. And first of all, my apologies for being slightly delayed. I was on Outer Ring Road and it was there was water all over the place. So Bluestone, we started it around 10 years back, and I think the idea at that time, and which still holds true, was that so we operate in a category which is kind of very slow to adopt to changes, very slow to adopt to new technologies and so on. If you compare fine jewelry, gold and diamond jewelry category or the players with almost every other category, you would notice that till now also jewelry is bought more or less in the same way it was bought 2 generations back or 20 years back, 30 years back. While, whereas if you look at any other category, let's say apparel, shoes, etc., 30 years back, it was over-the-counter experience where one would go to a shop. Let's say my dad would go to a shop to buy a pair of shoes or to buy a shirt. He would not go there just to browse it. Then came the large format stores, which actually replaced those counters with aisles. And then came your Myntra, Jabong, which made those aisles endless. So essentially from buying, the primary behavior shifted to browsing. And most of the consumers actually preferred this behavior over the earlier behavior, where they would go sit on a counter and talk to a salesperson as to, this is my requirement, show me a shirt with check, big checks, small checks, and so on. From there to browse first and buy if you happen to like it. And while this behavior was depicted in almost every category and provided in every category, in jewelry that was not the case. And gold and diamond jewelry is very tricky that way. So I think one of the things that we noticed after we started was, as we created meaningful browsing experience for people online, women just love to spend more and more time looking at jewelry. So jewelry was probably still the only category where a woman would have to make her decision in just 1 hour or 2 hours after entering into the shop. Unlike any other category where she would be browsing endless, let's say before sleeping, while commuting, every day, or over the weekends and so on. So that browsing behavior that we enabled on the website was loved by the consumers. Uh, and that actually honestly moved the needle for us. For the first 6 years or so, we were purely online. But then, as we spoke to more and more of our consumers, we realized that while they love the fact that they, for the very first time, they can browse jewelry, they can look at, let's say, 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 designs without the pressure of buying or without the pressure of shortlisting. The sheer fact that the value of the purchase is very high and the general fear in the category is so high was when we realized that if we enable our consumers to actually also walk into the stores after having browsed thoroughly online, that would actually create a very meaningful experience for us. So this is one of the first innovations that we had done to create a truly omni-channel experience in the category. And it does not stop there. I would say that's kind of at the forefront of it, and that weaves everything together. But there are innovations in the way we present the products. There's innovation in the way we manufacture the products. We have our own production, etc. also, and a lot of innovation in analytics, etc. also that we'll talk about slightly later.
Sure. I think that's fantastic. And you guys are clearly the trailblazer who've changed consumer behavior dramatically in a very, very, what you call, I would say, a staid industry, right? So I'm going to start the next round of questions. And Amit, I'll start with you first. Talk a bit about some examples of best in class. Gaurav just mentioned jewelry as one. What are them? You are supporting startups from a technology perspective. Let's talk about some great innovations that you are seeing in the industry that have created a wow for you and as a shopper as well as a business partner.
Thank you, Rajat. On a lighter note, I think I had to innovate about being on stage after such a long time and what to do about the glare of these lights. So, the trick I found out is to look at my co-panelists more than I look at the audience. Just on a lighter note. To answer your question, Rajat, seriously, I think Google is at the forefront of being involved in these innovation conversations with our e-commerce customers all the time. And there's a bunch of things we do. First of all, let's start with the big issue right now in e-commerce or actually in any other consumer-facing business, which is how do you acquire more customers? Look, we have the customer is the same. I am one customer and everybody wants my attention. Everybody wants me to give discounts, to give me discounts, and everybody wants me to buy on their platform. So how does an e-commerce player figure out which customer to target? And also with this relevant environment that we are in today, which I don't think anybody's talked about as much as yet, but there is this realization of what I would call as the funding winter, etc., whatever you want to call it, but there is an economic environment that is causing us to innovate more on trying to be efficient on acquiring customers. So how do we acquire customers at scale? How do we acquire customers without increasing our cost linearly? And that is an area I think that Google works a lot with our customers in the startup and e-commerce space. And what we do is we bring in assets from all of Google, which helps us bring insights about what the customer's online behavior is. Every customer today is connected. As you know, I learned something new recently about this whole voice, video, and vernacular. So customers today would like to be heard. And for the e-commerce players to understand what their preferences are in terms of choice of platform, medium, etc. And also to get insights about what their buying behavior is without the customer having to tell that. So the end customer doesn't need to tell the e-commerce retailer what's their preference, but you're supposed to know how to put up the right recommendation engines to them. So we help our customers with that kind of customer acquisition on one end. The second step that we help our customers is on merchants. So for example, we work very deeply with Shopify to help not just provide storefronts and digitization to large amounts of merchants, but also to help them onboard these merchants more efficiently, to help them remove the friction on that onboarding process, to build a partnership with the merchant. So we also help Shopify and Google work together to build a partnership for Shopify's merchants on how do they expand, how do they acquire more customers, how do they digitize, etc. The third aspect is now about the last mile in the case of e-commerce. So we help our customers with AI ML models on last mile optimizations, where to keep stocks, where to not keep stocks, how to keep it closer to the darkest store, and how do we do last mile optimization and make sure that delivery is happening at the right pace, right time in the most efficient manner. Lastly, since we are in Bangalore, there is a future of this innovation that's coming up, which is around Web3. And like I said, while we are in Bangalore, why miss an opportunity to mention it? We're also working with some of our customers to figure out what the future of e-commerce will look like with areas like Web3 coming up. And there's a lot of conversation happening on that. More in a smaller forum, but happy to converse on any of these areas.
Thanks. And yeah, it'd be good to hear about Web3 and Metaverse and how that sort of helps translate. And Amit, I'm going to come to you on this. What are some of the great, what are some of the great innovations, I think from your, Vineeth to you, just what is some of the best in case examples of innovation that you've seen besides something that you've done recently, which created a wow with your shoppers, and then some industry that some other industry where you sort of felt as a customer or as a competitor, it was a fantastic experience.
See, somewhere along the way, we often tend to bucketize things. So we began with the so-called offline retailers. Then we said that there is the online retailers. And then we said the O2O, online to offline bit came into being. And we all seem to have forgotten that the damn consumer is still the same. There is a need for us to be able to look at it, especially in the fashion business, in terms of more than e-commerce or O2O or online to offline. It is now clearly graduating into what one would call multi-experience commerce. Because, like I said, the consumer today is not just somebody who is sitting as a passive observer of how things are going. He is connected, he is informed, he is less loyal, and surely channel agnostic. That is where this whole process is moving towards. So when we talk about innovation or we talk about any new change that's expected from what we're seeing across industries, what the fashion industry has possibly seen is post the COVID impact, you've seen a step jump. Yes, very, very small compared to many of what the other industries are. But there has been a step jump primarily to keep the wheels in the bus going, because just about everything fell off, and the e-commerce in its traditional form took over to even keep the businesses running. When you had that capability coming in, you started looking at technology and innovation at various levels to be able to address a consumer who is now a lot more engaged. He's a lot more informed. And you needed to move or transcend beyond the concept of basic shopping. So online to offline moved away from just using what we call the endless aisle concept, where you typically used to possibly reduce or improve conversions in an offline setup to be able to deliver to consumers across the board. We saw how different channels have sort of connived to be able to deliver to the consumer a better experience. But more so, today, even an online to offline simple play is all about taking it to the next level, where you potentially are not just using the offline stores as stock points, but you're potentially using it to deliver to consumers, for them to pick it up, to exchange, to maybe alter, maybe even get their refund in cash if they are able to deliver to stores. And that has moved on, because at the end of it, when we discuss innovation and we talk about innovation, like I said, it is a mindset. It is not about those features that are customer facing, that's a big bang stuff. It is about an organization's capability, like I said, to put the consumer, but more importantly, to build teams of people who are willing to challenge the status quo, who are willing to possibly push the envelope at various levels. And for that to happen, they need to be more than, in many ways, risk averse to the possible failures.
Yeah, yeah.
They need to be able to operate in an environment that's filled with ambiguity and change. The most important aspect of potentially technology impacting the fashion business going forward is possibly the fact that what many of us are aware of is possibly social commerce in some way. In China, it's already 13 to 14% of
5 trillion by 2025.
Yeah,
So it's a
and-
huge number. And we are not even scraping this.
We are not scraping the
bottom of the barrel here. So
bottom
it's a
of-
massive, massive play, right?
AR, VR,
Yeah.
and technology and innovation will possibly reduce wastage in our business. The value leakages in the business are massive. We still have in the fashion business returns upwards of 30 to 35%, and it's predicted to only increase. So value leakages, sustainability, and possibly innovations in using new fabrics and technologies that could improve, reduce waste, reselling, resizing, and rentals are some of the other features that are expected to make big changes in the fashion business. In the
Thanks, Vineeth. Sameer, I'll come to you. Some exciting innovations that you've seen that ITC has come up with in the last few years that like created a wow for you as well, and then something outside the industry, outside your sort of business. Yeah.
So when the pandemic happened, and we were in the first 3-4 days, and nobody knew what was happening. You know, the first time I still remember we had that 1-day lockdown, and the HR manager called me and said, "No, we are not supposed to be going to office." So I said, "Okay, I mean, how does this work?" Right? And suddenly then the country closed down, and you realized there was something happening, and the need for certain kind of products really shot up. At that point of time, just to give you context, we have a brand called Savlon, and we said, "Hey, there's something happening in the environment. How do we read this now?" So I think one of the things which I think digital has done for us, and we were working on it before, and we were digitizing all our processes, etc., was that what will consumers need? So one thing we said that let's read China. I mean, India was developing, but China was already 4-5 months. The pandemic was already there. So we started reading data from China and said, what are these people doing there? And because we had, we had access to some, people, etc. in China, so we said, this is what's happening in China. Map it and start looking at weak trends in India. And now we said, so sanitize was the most obvious things which everybody knew right in the beginning that that's something which is required. But things like disinfectant sprays, masks, these came up. And that gave us time to innovate. The second thing is, when you look at from innovation, it was not just market facing. There's also, it's not about just launching a product, but it's about scaling a product. And the product has to be correct. The problem was, the COVID virus was only isolated in one lab in the world, which was in the US. So in the lockdown, you had R&D working on products, somehow shipping it to the US, jumping the queue, because everyone in the world was there trying to get their products tested, finding out that the product is fine. Obviously, you needed regulatory okays before you could make that claim. And yet, I think in the matter of 2.5 months, we were able to launch 6-7 new product formats. I think the brand went up 7x in that 1 year. The largest innovations like disinfectant sprays were, I think, 250-300 crores on the first year. Right, in FMCG, it's a bit of a product business. It's difficult. The other thing we were doing is, when we had talked a bit about it outside, is the key thing for us was the supply chain. How do you make so much product? This is when everybody's locked down. New product, new everything. Our designers were sitting in the UK because we were designing them because we wanted best of class products. That we will not compromise on product quality. So our designers were sitting out of the UK. Our testing was happening in the US. Our suppliers were all over the world. And this could only be possible because we live in a digital age.
Fantastic.
And the organization, we became truly a digital organization. So from a brick and mortar, we were doing things which were very, very different.
Long product life cycle launches,
Yes,
and it took like 18 months to suddenly 2.5 months, compress it, get it out.
No, there were things in days. Because I said 2.5 months, we launched so many, but there are some guys who are out in days. And I think the great thing for us was that the ecosystem really responded, that Indian suppliers sitting in India, and we said, this is what we need. We were communicating with them on a daily basis, saying, this is what the research is telling us, this is the specs. And they were sourcing stuff from India because there was no other way of doing it. And in those days, if you remember, even trucking from Chennai to a factory in Baddi was something very different. So the other thing we made a rule, we said everything has to be local. So the supply chain has to be maybe 100 kilometers from the factory. So when so we were doing local suppliers, local level, and we were scaling up. It was one end of it. The other end of it was e-com, because half the stores were closed. So the front facing, which was I think was most visible to everyone, was that we were able to give access to consumers. You're saying it's available, please take it.
Fantastic. And I think so. I think a lot of good came out of a very bad situation. Like I think what I was reading somewhere that technology innovation, almost 2030 came to the country in 2020, because everything was going to take 10 years at its own pace. Everybody just suddenly woke up and transformed. Prakash, I'm going to come to you. Just talk a bit about innovation, and Gaurav will come to you after that. And ma'am, I'm going to hear your views on some very innovative products that you've liked or enjoyed, some innovation stuff, Prakash.
Yeah, very quickly from our stable of redBus, I think we have all as customers experienced a lot of problems with hiring a cab if you have to go on an outstation trip. Typically there are fulfillment issues, cabs don't turn up on time, they end up cancelling, not coming on time, all those issues, right? Cab is not clean. And you typically are retaining the cab for a long duration, so you can't afford to have a poor quality cab. So we have launched, and this is more of an example of a business innovation, a business model innovation. We have launched something called Ride by redBus. I would urge all of you to check it out. It's a cab rental service where we are basically solving for fulfillment issues, improving reliability of cab supply by innovating with some fleet owners in a very interesting, keeping them as franchisees, etc. So we are doing it as a pilot to begin with in Bangalore and NCR, and hopefully scale it up once we prove it in these two markets. But if you are in NCR or in Bangalore, and if you ever need a cab to go to a different city, please check out Ride by redBus. Now, after that shameless plug, let me come on to things that have inspired me in the external environment. I think Vineeth touched upon one of it. I think social commerce, Meesho, I think sadly they are pivoting away from that model, but I thought social commerce has a lot of promise. And another very innovative product is TikTok. Sadly, we don't get to use it, but I'll tell you why I think these are very powerful, because I'm a big believer that innovation which is truly disruptive. Now we use the word disruption quite commonly, for anything and everything, but I'm referring to disruption in the truest sense as said by Professor Clayton Christensen in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. And if you've not read it, I would seriously urge you all to buy it and read it. It's an amazing book. And the fundamental premise of that book is that innovation that happens in the top end, which continues to give better and better services to existing customers, has a short shelf life. Beyond a point, people are impervious to further improvements in product. Whether you get a 180 megapixel camera or a 160 megapixel, it doesn't matter beyond a point, right? But the truly disruptive innovations are innovations that happen that get fundamentally non-users or people who use less, get them into the category, and it typically begins with a product experience that is not very good, but it is fundamentally very, very cheap compared to existing alternatives, and that is what leads to adoption. And over time, as the technology evolves, this will end up eating away the whole market. And to my mind, anything that empowers and grows the base of sellers, in the case of Meesho, let's say social commerce or the creator economy that TikTok kind of enabled, are very powerful examples, along with newer technologies like Web3 that is going to come in, which will have decentralized platforms that could further enable it. I think these are very powerful, innovative ideas for the future, and I hope big businesses get built out of that from India.
Fantastic, yeah, definitely some great thoughts on that. That innovation is, so it's not about just marginal improvement, but something that's a game changing. Gaurav, come to you on that. Just one or two examples of some fantastic innovation you've done and you've seen outside as well.
Yeah, so I think we have built, so in terms of innovations, a big category of the innovations that we have done is on the whole customer experience, on the whole customer experience side. So anyone who's on our website, if they are looking at any designs, they can see which all stores near them have carrying those designs. Then there are a lot of analytics also built in. So basis the browsing history, basis the browsing patterns, etc. in a particular city, the stock up of inventory happens in the stores in that particular city. So that there's a good overlap of some of those things, and the experience becomes meaningful. So the whole breadth of, so if there are 13 stores in Bangalore, let's say, the kind of merchandise that is going to be stocked up there is almost fully decided by the code. And there's not a merchandising team that actually decides that, okay, let's keep this in this store, let's keep that in that store. So that whole online to offline that Amit was talking about, and everything. So basically, whether you order online, you can go walk into a store, return it, and then pick another piece, and everything, the ledgers, etc., everything is balanced. Stuff like if you're in the store and when you're browsing in a store, so okay, so someone who has browsed online, walking into a store, we know the entire history, their cards, their wish list, and so on, and everything is kind of made available. Even other way around. So if someone is on this in a store and she checked out, let's say that woman looked at 15, 20 designs that she had liked, and then in our category, because the price points are so high, it's not that if she liked 10, she would buy all 10 today. But she would. She is interested in buying those over the next 2 years. So all that browsing that is done in the store is then available online also under the same account. So then she can sit and actually keep ordering those products in future also. So a lot of these small innovations.
Fantastic, and especially in a very complicated category with so many SKUs and all of that great stuff. Samuel, quickly to you, some ideas around innovation, best in class that you've seen and enjoyed.
Thanks, Rajat. Yeah, at Cloudflare, we believe innovation is a continuous process, and true to our mission to help build better internet. We've been innovating since for 12 years, where we started off as web application firewall on CDN company, and today we are in the digital transformation of redefining the network layer. So to allude to what Samir mentioned, it reminds me of innovation during the pandemic, actually. So I want to give two examples on how Cloudflare has been helping customers innovating, not just what we have been innovating with our products, and how we have been helping the community and the e-commerce in particular for the conversation here. Two distinctly different examples I can think of. One was a traditional brick and mortar, as Vineeth mentioned, that multiple facets of it. Brick and mortar, that was the main thing, but e-commerce in the infancy. And then the other one is a traditional e-commerce platform reaching out to customers. So predominantly, all the e-commerces do look at the key things is customer user experiences, how do you enhance that, and how we have been adding value. Before I get coming to these two cases of how pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic innovation did happen, which during the pandemic, you mentioned about the vaccination and things like that. So we did something as a community service. We launched some product as waiting room, because in US, it started off with US and across governments, which we did. When this was launched, there was a mad rush towards vaccination. The web servers could not even take those sites. This happens even in e-commerce. We would have Diwali sale and things like that, right? So I'm talking of an entirely different world, which is similar to it, where we provided something as a waiting room, absolutely free of cost as a service, and today it's available as such. So basically, it ensured that we queued up those vaccination one. So talking about innovation in the e-commerce world here, so the brick and mortar traditionally had for the marketing sites and what they had, but come pandemic, it changed, right? How do you enhance the user experience? How do you reach that? That changed in terms of what was just the marketing side to provide that your site is always available to those. So reinvent in terms of not just your customer facing one, availability of that, protecting those things. Then it comes as how do you deliver it closer to your customer, right? Because customer has choices, right? That seamless user experience is what is important, right? It also changed that cashless transactions and things like that. So there are a lot of back-end integration, which is that the surge of transactions increase. So it's the threats increase. So how do you ensure the availability of your service at all time and ensure the customer transaction goes through securely and deliver at the edge? So some of this, what we have done is closer to the customer, closer to the origin, and ensure the security of it, but without compromising the performance of your service. That's key.
Yeah, fantastic, because while we talk about all of this stuff, the engine needs to be on, right? And especially during these big surges, the engine needs to be on. So that's fantastic to hear that. Dr. Jivisha, I'll come to you. Just talk briefly about innovation and the PM Gati Shakti program. How is that going to innovate transportation and last mile logistics and create a platform for better service? Because all of this rests on the premise that product gets to customers fast and cheap, right?
Yeah, so while I was listening to everyone, and what was coming to my mind is that while you're doing the innovation for your individual company, it's very important that you have a very strong infrastructure to support it.
Yeah.
You can come up with a lot of infrastructure, and if you do not have an integrated transport system in your country, if you do not have an integrated digital systems in your country, it will be really very difficult to, move ahead. So while we were talking about COVID, I'd like to give example of something called as ULIP, which is Unified Logistic Integrated Platform. It was one of the things which we as a ministry conceived during the COVID times as well, where we had a lot of demands from almost all the industries that, all this business, it rests on the transportation and the delivery of product to the customer. And while all the modes of transportations have individually developed on its own in our country, a multimodal transportation is still a challenge. If you want your product to travel from one part to another part of the country, it will be using more than one modes of transportation. And when we talk about, it's not about the seamless connectivity, it's also more about the system, the filling up of forms. So if you have a good which needs transportation through a train, it will require filling up of an e-form, which is there for the railways, or the physical form there. You have a different form which the supplier will be filling for the, for example, a ship. An e-way bill will be differently filled, a receipt for the, so on and on. So we decided that, okay, it's not just transportation, also whether it's customs and other fields which we need to integrate. And that's when we thought about the ULIP, which was amongst the 7 engines, 7 technology commons, which Honorable Prime Minister also talked about. Now this system is really interesting because, it has an equal partnership of public as well. It has got 3 stages where you have got the, governance, administration, and then the presentation phase, where the presentation is open to all the industrialists. You can come register, and where we have already integrated almost 29 systems of 6 ministries with more than 1,600 APIs. We are requesting the industries to register, see what they can come up with. If they can make some applications and make sure that the track and trace, the visibility of their cargoes, or whether it's about the e-filling and the multimodal transportation, how they can improve on it. I think it's going to be a real game changer, because while the PM Gati Shakti, which is in, which is supposed to change the infrastructure planning in the country and provides the last mile connectivity, ULIP is supposed to rest on it and make the digital systems also integrated. So while the infrastructure will be connected and seamless by using a PM Gati Shakti platform, where you have a GIS-based digital platform where you'll be taking decisions and planning infrastructure in very short time. So you'll be saving on time overrun, cost overrun. You will also be providing the common smallest industry, from the MSME to startups, that this is the new infrastructure coming up in this part of country. We have planned it. This is the area, this is the land available, and you can plan your infrastructure nearby. You can also be showing so you have all the, you have got 900 plus layers on this platform, where you have got the revenue maps, you have got the SEZ areas, you have got all the ICDs map, you have more than 3,000 warehouses available in the country mapped. So it will help you to find the, the most cost-effective solution for you. So I think in very short, I'll say that it's going to, the PM Gati Shakti will be the infrastructural gap, from addressing the infrastructural gap from the government side, whereas the ULIP, I'll in fact request all of you to have a look at the platform and see if it can be of any use and you can make any application out of it.
And talk briefly of the waterways as well, because
Everything.
so
you name it.
there's a lot of focus around using the waterways and the rivers as well for transportation, and there is that whole.
Yes. So we are trying to come up with something called as the port connectivity plan for the whole country. Generally, when we look at the ports, we see that 98% of our export is through shipping, by using the mode of shipping. And it's not focusing just on the major ports. What we have come up with is a classification as major ports, minor ports, major operational, major non-operational, minor non-operational as well, where we're trying to look at even the smallest port of the country, where what as a government we can do for the last mile connectivity, so that you can have, so that you can realize it to the full potential. It's very important. You come up with a world-class infrastructure, world-class private infrastructure, but the national highway might be a kilometer far. And all your trucks are going to get congested in just that 1 kilometer section, and that turnaround time will be so bad for your, the whole supply chain. It's going to make difference. The charge of the shipping is so high, and your rates are going to skyrocket. So for that, we are trying to. So it's not just for port and shipping, but the country as a whole. We are trying to look at the last mile connectivity for everyone, whether it's steel industry, coal industry, textile industry, you name it, the smallest of the player. We are thinking that how we make sure that they do not suffer from this just last mile connectivity gap, which has not happened because the Ministry of Road has come up with a fantastic national highway and the Ministry of Railway has come up with a fantastic railway network, but there is no transition network which is available to connect this. So that is what we are trying to do, and where we have also asked the government, we have asked industries to come up and tell us that, while I was mentioning about that digital system, where we want you all to tell us that, okay, this is important and this is where we are suffering, and if we come up with, we plug this infrastructure gap, it's going to affect all of us in big way. So
fantastic to hear that, and it'll be good to maybe have more marketing of this, because recently we had at one of our partners meeting, Mr. Gadkari was there. He laid out the entire framework, and it was an eye-opener for all of us to understand the whole waterways and the ports and how it's all being linked to create that that last mile delivery efficiency. But great to hear in a abridged version. I think we are out of time. It's such a fantastic bunch of panelists, but we just don't have enough time to have a discussion. Last word from everybody around innovation, key thoughts on digitization, starting with you, Gaurav, and I'll make my way this way. Just quick thoughts.
Yeah, so I think digital is the way to go. I think so it's going to add efficiency in every aspect of your business. So yeah, so one needs to adopt it now.
Sameer?
I think digital is going to unlock India in the way it's nothing has ever done so. I think we all brought up as middle class children to aspire for jobs. I think now, all children are not looking to do that. They're trying to create value for themselves. It's going to be a different world and a different India.
Thanks. Samuel?
Yeah, innovation is a precursor to the digital transformation, and technology has been used effectively and it will be continuously used to enable and transform the digital world for sure.
Thanks. Vineeth?
Technology clearly is changing consumers. Consumers are demanding more, and shopping is moving on to a scenario where shopping is no more buying and selling, but more experience. So it's multi-experience commerce is what we are looking forward to.
Thanks. Amit?
I think if you want to take care of your customers in connected customers in today's age, you want to innovate, come to Google.
Good plug.
For government to innovate, what we need is partnership from all of you. So I'll just say that look at us as a facilitator and not someone who are just making rules in the silos. Come to us, tell us what you want, and we are here to facilitate.
Thank you.
Yeah, very cheesy. While love may make the world go around, it's innovation that makes the business world go around. So all the very best in your innovation journey.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for a fantastic session. Thank you everybody for listening and really enjoyed that. Thank you.